Good evening and welcome to Mindful Life 291. I am your host Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It is the 13th of the 10th, the Friday the 13th of October. Imagine that. There's a Friday the 13th of October. Imagine that. What a day today is. Anything strange occurred today? Noticed any strange occurrences going on today with this what's the word for that? Interesting date. Well, today we were talking, I think they say tomorrow is an eclipse. Yeah, I saw that, a partial solar eclipse, I believe. We were talking, as is regular here in Trinidad and Tobago, we're talking about crime because recently the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service made a massive haul. The haul came in actually right after a very dangerous incident where an attempt was made on the life of a senior prisons officer. Well, it seems like the attempt was made on the life of a senior prisons officer. It ended up being just an attempt on his bodyguard's life, it seems, in the end, but nonetheless, let's just browse over that story before we dive into the find. Gunmen ambush wound prison boss's bodyguard. Suspect detained seeking treatment at hospital. Acting Commissioner of Prisons Deoprasad Ramuta has expressed disappointment with the members of the underworld who were behind what he called an assassination attempt on two of his officers, including Deputy Commissioner of Prisons Sherwin Bruce. His comment came after prison officer Steve Phipps, 49, was shot and wounded while picking up Deputy Commissioner of Prisons Sherwin Bruce in Barataria yesterday. Police said Phipps arrived at Bruce's Sparrow Avenue, Barataria home to pick him up around 7:05 a.m. in a white Toyota Fortuner while waiting for Bruce to come outside. However, two vehicles, a white Toyota taxi with the plate numbers and a Nissan Almera, pulled up and three masked men got out and began shooting at the unmarked prison vehicle. Phipps, who is Bruce's bodyguard, told police that he bent down to avoid being shot and also managed to return fire at his attackers. He was, however, shot in the upper and lower right arm. Nightmare on Elm Street and my Latcher Bless. Lol. Imagine DCPs need bodyguards in this place. Well, that's the kind of place we live in, and you see exactly why. You see exactly why, because their lives are at risk. And now the bodyguard's life is at risk. Like, if you are a bodyguard for one of these senior law enforcement officers and you're just a regular member of the service, I find you should get some kind of special salary. You're putting yourself a bit more in danger out there. The man was shot. He got shot twice in his arm. I mean, they weren't life-threatening at the end of the day, but shot twice in your arm is not something everybody just looks forward to going through. At least it seems like he returned fire, and it seems like he may have hit one of them because there was a report that a suspect was dropped off in Arima Hospital nursing some injuries, and they caught him there. I believe he was discharged from the hospital since then, and he's assisting the police in investigations. Now, stemming from this, it was said that some of the work coming out of this led to the seizure of a whole trove of high-powered rifles in Santa Cruz. Massive weapons haul, assault rifles, ammo, firearm components seized as police search for the men responsible for the shooting of a 49-year-old prison officer in Barataria yesterday morning. They found a massive cache of ammunition, assault rifles, and firearm components in Santa Cruz. And this is part of the initial suspicion I have. You were chasing the shooters after this, and from chasing them you stumbled upon a massive weapons cache. If you just attempted an assassination on a senior law enforcement personnel, would you lead the officers to your cash house? So I don't know if it's really directly as police searched for the men who did that shooting. Inspector Johnny Bravo say he trips into the guns couple miles in the bush. Lucky happenstance. Like, I find that hard to believe. It's, you know what it feels like, and I'm putting on my conspiratorial hat here. This is my conspiratorial hat. Pull it a little lower. The conspiracy feels, you'll have to come in a little closer for this. The conspiracy feels like a lot of public attention coming in on the police about police inaction. Ooh, Emma Kufi. Got to find it back and keep it at quick notice. A lot of criticism coming in towards the police for inaction, and then this is kind of scary business. This is reminiscent of cartel countries where they run up in broad daylight, early morning, first thing in the morning. They're looking to kill law enforcement senior personnel, and perfectly right at this opportune moment, when it feels like they may be losing control, oh look, we found an entire cache of guns. Like, I don't believe you stumble upon these guns searching for those men. Good night, Michelle. I don't believe you stumble upon those guns searching for those men. It just feels hard to believe. And then there was talk additional to this that there was some 2 months of surveillance and information gathering. And okay, is it surveillance and information gathering that found the guns, or is it in pursuing the men who made the attempt on the prisons officers? Which one is it? Or is it that you already had the information, you already knew where it was, and you waited for the opportune moment to make this seizure for just the right amount of publicity? That's what it feels like. And I am happy if it's just the police found illegal guns and those are less guns for the criminals to be killing people. I am happy for that. I'm not taking that away. If it indeed is good police work, congratulations to the police. Thank you, officers. But you understand why it feels suspicious. It feels strange. It just feels very convenient in timing. The same day a gangland cartel. I actually find it very scary. Because the story keep changing from reputable sources within the TV. That's why it sounds suspicious. Yes, because if there is a cache like this just laying around in the Santa Cruz forest, I presume that may just be the cache for one group. This has me feeling like those other groups probably have their own stash houses with their own M16s and 16s and 50 caliber rifles. Listen, you do not want to be in a standoff with men that have M16s, 50 caliber rifles, and the other guys outfitted in AR-15s and Uzis. It's a bad idea. It's not going to be a good time. And you're not going to get me to believe that on a lucky happenstance of searching for the killers or searching for the attempted assassins, you happened upon the only cache of M16s in the country. If you found it there, I believe there would be more. If they did 2 months of surveillance, who are the people visiting this area? That's the other thing. I feel like it's harder to surveil an area and an incident like that and come up with no arrests than to come up with an arrest. if I'm a bad man, I'm King Badman. I'm the top G in this badman business. As the boss man. I am having millions of dollars in hardware essential for protecting my criminal enterprise and my criminal empire. I am having all of that just in the bush, and nobody protects it, nobody looks after it, nobody keeps an eye out for it. There aren't any watchmen, nothing. It's just lying out there in the bush chilling. Okay. And the police, good night June Rabi, and the police surveilled and gathered information for months, and all they knew was where the guns were. No information on persons. You see, this is why I don't like the TTPS is on a gun recovery drive. They're out there looking to recover guns, and I'm like, I don't care for that, to be very honest with you, because looking at this, it seems evident the guns are coming in unstopped. They aren't worrying about the guns, how to get in the guns. The guns on the table, you know, sometimes when you look at the guns found, it's usually just a bunch of rusty guns covered in mud that seem like they were buried last century. No, these guns seem like, you know, they may have been brought in this year. These boys ain't struggling to bring in guns. So to show me that you seized 50 guns doesn't tell me anything when 50 guns may be coming in the same day. It doesn't make sense stopping the guns. You have to stop the men, because there are just too many guns. Good night, Paul Duncan. TTPSPR gave us that to hold. Shows what they think of what we'll believe. So they didn't see anyone. How they know where it was? What was the surveillance? How was the surveillance? 2 months. Michelle, you asking the questions. That's why I said I find it hard to believe. I think it would have been easier to find a suspect than to not find a suspect. You had to work hard to go through that, find all these guns and not find a suspect. You're telling me you didn't, if you surveilled this area for 24 hours, somebody didn't come and go? This amount of guns? Come on, man. Come on, man. And the thing is, one of the interesting things, and I remember pointing this out previously when we spoke about prisons officers. Hey, have you... When we spoke about prisons officers, can you greetings in the name of the Imperial Majesty, blessed love, my brothers and sisters, blessed love I. Hold it down. Inspector actually used the word stumbled upon. Ha ha ha. Ask away Junior Abby. An interesting thing looking at the whole business with the prisons officers is that some of it may have to do with the fact that recently jammers were installed inside the prisons. Lives under threat due to jammers at maximum security prison. There are authorized phone lines for inmates in prisons throughout the country, and with jammers in use, the lives of prisons officers may be under threat. 2 days before prison officer Steve Phipps was shot, this is what Prison Officers Associations wrote in a letter to Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines. In the letter, the association said they were grateful for moves to improve security by installing jammers at the maximum security prison. However, they proposed that an authorized service provider supply phones at designated areas in all prisons that would be monitored to allow prisoners to call their families before jammers are turned on at the Port of Spain prison and at other prisons. Hey, well, what's even worse is the police release states that they surveilled the area but said nothing about the perpetrators visiting these sites. Exactly. Like, back to the guns just for a moment. What was the suspicion that made you look at the area in the first place? What drew your attention there? I remember Canute, nearly every 2 weeks it had some coming into that particular Couva shipping warehouse. So all of those could have been from that warehouse for all you know. Jammers were supposed to have been in place around 2009-10. As to whether they worked or not, well, that is the biggest question. Well, they were, and the head of the prison said he didn't know whether they worked or not because he wasn't in control of them, which I find to be a strange thing. The prison's officers aren't the body in control of the jammers. Okay, well then I would suppose you're doing that to make sure there's a layer of protection from corruption. Well then, who it is that is controlling the jammers, and why weren't they working all along? Well, now they're there, apparently. The police can't arrest themselves, lad. But the jammers have for cell phones, not wired telephones, to turn on and off. Let's continue. Prison officers' lives were placed under threat when those jammers were turned on at MSP. They are blaming officers when prison officers were neither responsible for the purchase, installation, and activation of those jammers nor for the failed delivery of promised authorized phones to inmates. Please rectify this situation at MSP as soon as possible by installing these phones. I just find it so interesting. I just find it so interesting that the prison's officers are the ones carrying the message for the prisoners. Isn't that a kind of scary position we are in? Jammers being installed in the prisons, and the prisoners can intimidate the prison officers enough to make them carry messages on their behalf. And we know for a fact that these cell phones in the prisons are a key problem in our crime network in Trinidad and Tobago. Regularly you hear that many of the gang leaders that are calling shots, that are controlling different criminal groups in Trinidad and Tobago, are seated comfortably inside of the prisons. So you cannot have phones making outside calls. And the reason that the threats on the prison officers have any weight in the first place is because of the phone calls. I remember making this point long ago. A large part of the reason prison officers are under danger is because there's corruption inside of their own ranks. If there wasn't corruption that allowed some prisoners to have access to communication to the outside, if all the prison officers were in solidarity, in honesty, and not allowing communication to the prisoners, then they have nothing to fear. Like, I don't mind the prison officers on behalf of the prisoners, because I mean, you're human and the prisoners are human. On behalf of the prisoners, you're saying, well, this is a cruel thing, you should really help the prisoners here. This is an unkind measure to put in place. But to tell me that the reasoning used by the prison officers to do something for the prisoners is because they are scared for their lives, I find that preposterous. I just always wonder what is main resource of crime: territory, drugs, poverty, oppression, politics. That is a good question. Power. I'd say power. The main resource of crime is power. That's why there's so much violence, because you want to be viewed as powerful. The reason people don't cross you and they pay you for your drugs is because you have power. It's about power and casting that image of power across a wide area. That's the reason for it. It's the reason why the public even knows some gangsters' names. Why do you think they allow the public to know some of their names? Because it's a power move. They want you to know. They want the power there. But yeah, it's, to me, I don't mind the prison officers carrying a message for the prisoners' betterment. But to say the reason you carry this message is because you are afraid for your life, I find that to be a ridiculous setup. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. there's a lucrative extortion racket carried out by a minority of inmates from using unauthorized cell phones. They are not only using these phones to send out hits to their henchmen, but to extort money from the public. We implore you to install these phones so the majority of inmates can communicate with their families and to minimize the threats officers face. The letter from the Prisons Association read. And here's something that I also find very strange. This convo in work today, do you think crime would be lower if people like Dole Shady existed? I think violent crime would have been lower if many of the heads remained, if many of the older heads remained, because that's something you see in the criminal underworld. The guy that they killed in Enterprise, and it seems like they're still trying to kill out his family, he had some control over the criminal activity there, it seems, allegedly, and so do other large criminal figures. Because they control so much of the criminal network, there's less violence. When the criminal network is more splintered, there's a leader here, leader here, leader here, there's much more violence because everyone is attempting to stake their claim. If it's more organized and you have a clear head, it's much less violent. Tends to be. The prisoners that were there was on a murder charge, and they all walked in with their phones normal. And yeah, what the prison officers are saying there is they are admitting that there was a business basically going on inside of the prisons where a few people had cell phones, and those few people would sell the opportunity to call out from the prisons. Now, at the same time, they are saying that the landline phones that are supposed to be provided to the prisoners are not being provided. That someone was given the contract to install it and no one installed it. So there are no phones in the prisons, and that's what they are petitioning for. They would like some phones to be installed before they turn on the jammers, so that the prisoners would at least be able to communicate with their relatives. Now, I find it interesting. It could nearly make you wonder, again, pulling on the suspicion, the conspiracy theory cap a little tighter. It could make you wonder, do the people who ensure landlines are not supplied to the prisons, and the criminals who make a lot of money from supplying phone calls on the black market to prisoners, are they working together? Listen, Sandstorm. This is quoting from the prison officers here. These phone systems for inmates to communicate with their families and attorneys were promised over 20 years ago. However, we do not know who got the contract and why they were paid without delivering what was promised. We request an investigation into expenditure within the Ministry of National Security and specifically the prison service, as significant contracts are given without proper monitoring and evaluation. And Michelle, I understand the sentiment that they don't need phones, but landlines I understand. Landlines make sense because it's not like they would have freedom to always call out. You have a specific time, you may have to request this, you go, you make your call, and you may be asking for a visit, you may be calling to request your lawyer come in. These are things that are reasonable for even a prisoner, and the calls that are on a landline would be monitored. Nathan, if the public really knows what really goes on inside the walls of the prison, they wouldn't believe. Bro, few things would surprise me. You see videos coming out from inside of those prisons. Arguments about Pablo. But that seems highly suspicious to me. It's highly suspicious that on one side a contract was given for the landlines. no landlines were supplied, and on the next side, some prisoners out there making bank by supplying the phone instead. That's very suspect. Something about that really doesn't quite add up to me at all. I don't understand what's going on there. Each prisoner has a PBX with landlines attached to them. Access codes are given to each extension. Further stories on policing and crime going on right now in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, there was some some positive reports coming out of the police recently. Police reportedly stopped a fuel for drugs exchange going down on Los Eros Beach. Police seized 60 barrels of fuel that they presume was going to be exchanged for drugs down on the beach there. So that was one of the things that the police got through it. Then they seized 0.5 million in cocaine they found in car parts that they were attempting to smuggle up the islands. The police seem to be really working out there. Seem to be. How much does it cost to charge a phone inside? I can't imagine cells have plug outlets. Well, I don't know. I've never been on the inside. There were many GSC and this was a topic. Nothing was done or discovered from these GSC. Well, some may have been discovered, but then what? And to be fair, they are installing jammers now, so I don't know, bro. A very good topic, but however, to get a true representation of what takes place behind the, I wonder what the prison officer's salary is. I think it's somewhere like close to the 10,000 mark, if I remember correctly. Somewhere up that side. Not like nothing ridiculous, but you could live relatively comfortably off of that. You'll have to organize a visit. Well, I might, who knows? And further on from that, man wins lawsuit, wants action against cops. Listen to this. This is a kind of scary story. 4 years after he won his kidnapping, robbery and assault lawsuit against police officers, safety officer Clint Atong is still awaiting feedback over whether criminal charges will be laid against the policemen. And you see, this is the issue that makes our boys in blue into a gang. Issues like this. And as security personnel in a country, you do not want to be looked at as a gang. Like regularly I hear police complain, you hear citizens complain. Why when police shoot someone there's a protest and they burn tires and they all are too wicked, and when the gangsters kill someone there's nothing. And okay, I understand the complaint, I understand where it comes from and the look at the disparity in the treatments there. But really and truly, you do not want the public to look at your police service the same way they look at a gang. You do not want them to look at your security service the same way they look at a gang. That the only reason they have any respect for you is just because they fear that you are going to physically harm them or kill them. That's not the position you want your police to be in. I once saw a man smuggle an entire 2-liter ice cream bowl filled with cigarettes into the jail. The guards took it in front of everyone and gave it back once general population went to sleep. How did you see that, bro? Shouldn't the Commissioner of Prisons know why a contract is paid but the contract not performed? Not necessarily. You see, that's the thing with these government. Was there on which side? On the officer side or on the tenants? And that's the thing with many of these government institutions, government organizations. They are so multi-layered that they are so multi-layered that you could find yourself, for example, the complaint that the DPP has been complaining about, where he says they need a new office, but he is not in control of acquiring an office. He's not in control of outfitting of that office. So You are waiting on another level to do it for you. Men were paying $100 per cigarette. Wow. Yikes. No wonder they make so much money in there. It's a lucrative business. But again, as I was saying, you do not want your security service, your security personnel, to be seen as a gang, and things like this cause that. This is after a High Court judge directed the judgment be sent to the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Commissioner of Police. One of the officers was among 900 police constables promoted to the rank of corporal on September 29th. And Atong said this news had left him emotional and experiencing flashbacks of the incident. In his lawsuit, he had brought action against constables Murray Mohammed, Ronnie Edwards, civilian Premchand Sukran, and the state. Atong stated that in October 2011, he was kidnapped, handcuffed, and punched in the face. And at the police station, he was beaten with a PVC hose, struck on the face with a slipper, hit with a stick with a bulge, and also threatened to sign a paper. After the 5-hour ordeal, his cellular phones were returned and he was allowed to leave the station. The $5,000 that was taken was not returned. In delivering the judgment in 2019, the judge ordered that the money be repaid in 48 hours, and he said that the factual matrix which unfolded and the fact finding that the court engaged in the matter instilled a sense of grave disquiet and alarm. He said he was appalled that to date no disciplinary action had been taken against the officers. The incident happened in 2011. 2011. The incident happened in 2011. The men were found guilty in 2019, and one of the men still received a promotion in 2023. Kidnapping, robbery, assault. But when you're a police officer, no worries. Eh? The Express reached out to the DPP's office to find out the status of the matter in relation to the officers, but a return call was not received. Contact was also made with the head of Trinidad and Tobago Police Services Corporate Communications Department, Joanne Archie, who said a further investigation has to be conducted to determine whether in fact anything went from the court to the Commissioner of Police. She advised that Atong communicate with the Office of the Commissioner of Police at his earliest convenience. Yeah. So, criminals, men found guilty of a crime, and a crime as heinous as kidnapping, assault, and robbery, and they're still comfortably there in our police service. Imagine that, eh? Imagine that. As people say, that is why crime can't done. And in just the legal news going around there, another story in the legal framework going around there, I just found this one interesting. It's an interesting one. Rhoda Barrett held in contempt of court to pay Gary. Social media blogger Rhoda Barrett has been found in contempt of court. The declaration was made today by High Court Justice Betsy Ann Lambert Peterson after Barrett disobeyed a previous injunctive order made by the judge that restrained her from republishing certain defamatory statements she made against former police commissioner Gary Griffith. So she's going to have to pay again because she made defamatory statements against Double G. Double G sued her. He won an injunction that made it so that she could not republish those statements, and when he won that injunction, she responded by posting the injunction and posting the letter, and the pre-action protocol letter would have a quote of the same defamatory statements, alleged defamatory statements. And she reposted that. So, of course, now in contempt. I just wanted to read this one to highlight for all of us who speak in the online space and talk and type, etc. Bat in your crease. Now, there are some bloggers, I'm not necessarily saying people like her, but there are some bloggers who have financial backing from people higher up. They could afford to weather quite a few defamation lawsuits. If you are not one of those, bat in your crease. Because defamation is illegal in Trinidad and Tobago, and the courts do seem to take a pretty keen view to some of these things. Just so you know. Now, the second part of the stories that I found interesting for today, the second group of stories that I wanted to go through today. Well, not group, but second story. And it has to do with housing. I follow some people over on X, Twitter, and you know, some of them are more to the left, and quite a few people have the belief that housing is a human right. I don't know if there are any people inside of the live right now with that kind of belief, but there are many people with that kind of belief. Housing is a human right. Every human has a right to a house. No one should be homeless. Everyone has a right to live somewhere. You believe that, Umer Zen? Okay. Everybody has a right to a house. But, you see, for me, I believe that no one can have a right to anything that requires someone else's labor. Trinidad really is a rich country to say housing is a human right. No, it's not a rich country. Many poor countries said the same thing. That's kind of a leftist, Marxist, communist, socialist style of view where you believe that the government has a duty to supply housing to all of the people. Everyone has a right for housing. It's not necessarily about wealth. It's about economic and political view. And some people have that view, but the problem with that is it requires someone else's labor. How do you have a right for someone else's labor? To get a house requires someone to build said house. How do you have a right to demand someone give you their labor? And in the case where you have to pay for this person's labor and you give someone a house thinking it's their right, what do you do when they cannot pay? If the HDC in Trinidad and Tobago has a view that, you know, affordable housing is a human right, everyone has a right to get affordable housing and be placed in a home, then how could you ever evict anyone? Honorable Mr. Speaker says housing is a right, but there are requirements to access it. Then it's not a right, it's a privilege. Anything that has requirements to access it is not a right, it's a privilege. You have to earn it, therefore it cannot be a right. By definition. That's like the discussion we were having coming down to the end last night. Words have meanings, and we have to use the words in the way they are meant to be used. Otherwise, we wouldn't get the meaning of what we're trying to say. We wouldn't understand what each other is saying. Words have meanings. A right can't have requirements needed in order for you to access it. Then it's not a right. Nonetheless, HDC evicts Tarodale residents. I think for those who say it's a right, give them a plot of land and see if they build themselves. Now, here's something I could say, Torres. I could see, you could get me to see, and I'm even in this, I have some trepidation, but land in the country of your birth should be a right. Like, you could get me to believe that everyone has a right to access some portion of land in the country of their birth. If I am a national of Trinidad and Tobago, I could understand an argument to say I should be able to have a birthright to peace of Trinidad and Tobago, like literal peace of Trinidad and Tobago. I think that makes sense. And especially noting that the government holds and owns a lot of land, it makes sense that the government relinquishes that land to the people. That could make sense. And the land is no one's labor. No one has to work to build the land. The land is already there. Cuba and Venezuela have almost free housing from the government, although they are poor examples. Oh, on the contrary, that has been a misconception. What has been a misconception, Honorable Mr. Speaker? That so what is the difference between a right and a privilege? In that case, if you could require requirements in order to access a right, then what's the difference between a right and a privilege? Punel Brewster says housing is an accomplishment that most dream of, but not always a reality for most. Correct. But I agree, yes, at least land right should be allowed to citizens. Yeah. I kinda have that feeling. And you don't have a right to a house. You could do what you want with the land. You could build a shack. You could live on a coconut tree, or what? Well, probably not a coconut tree. You could live on a tree and do what you want. But I find like you could have an argument that at least every national of the country should have a piece of the nation. If I am a national of this nation, I should have a piece of this nation. I could understand that. But to go down the housing line, the housing, from the time you enter housing, it requires labor. And it's the same thing, and I know this one is sometimes controversial, but it's the same thing with healthcare. Healthcare is labor. Someone has to work in order for you to get healthcare. How could you get a right to someone else's labor? And for example, in healthcare, there are levels to healthcare. There are some levels of healthcare where very few people in the earth are able to perform some of these procedures. Very few areas may have the technology for it. Is it that you have a right for that one scientist, one doctor who is capable of performing this rare surgery? You have a right to make him perform it on you? 8 billion people have a right? No, it's impossible. That's not a right. You don't have a right to that. You have a privilege in Trinidad and Tobago where you have the privileged access towards free healthcare or public sponsored healthcare, but it's not a right. That's not what a right is. We have more than enough land here for people to build themselves dwelling, but then the question of social responsibility arises, especially when it comes to the destitute. Correct. You see, the problem with homeless people very often is not just that they don't have homes. When you're talking about destitute people on the streets, you could build a house and put them in it, and you will still end up in a lot of problems, because very often they not having a home is sometimes the smallest of their issues. Well, if you're paying for it, then you have a right to it. Exactly, Canute. And then you have a right to access the goods that you pay for. It's not a right to housing. It's not a right to healthcare. You have a right to access what you pay for. And that goes for anything. HDC evicts Taradale tenants. Beating her chest as tears poured down her face, mother of 7, Sabrina McLeod, on Thursday begged the Housing Development Corporation not to evict her family. In a voice cracking with desperation, she cried, "I have a newborn child. Where do you expect me to go?" McLeod, her husband Raymond Mitchell, and their 7 children are one of 20 households facing eviction. McLeod said she has been living at the house at Hellshire Avenue, Taradale, for the past 15 years. And knew their account was in arrears. We went to HDC on many occasions and they say they are not ready for we to pay. It was $65,000 we owed the last time we checked, but now they waited until we so much to now to give us an eviction letter, she cried. Mitchell's husband Raymond confessed that he had made only 4 payments to HDC since he moved into the house 15 years ago. With the HDC and police advancing to seize their property, Mitchell said his employer quickly made $25,000 available to him to make an HDC payment. "I have the money here right now," Mitchell said. And that's kind of the issue. That's a point, RL. That's a point. Omazen says, I have things I need to say. All right, Omazen, jump in. What things you need to say there, sir?
Okay, first of all, I changed getting some issues on TikTok. So my usual name is Rome. So I'm just using my email name until TikTok sorted.
Oh, great. Rome, what going on?
Good. I've been away for a while. I do apologize for my absence. I had some stuff that I needed to take care of. Now that I'm back in the country. So a couple of things, right? I'm gonna be as blunt and as straightforward as I can be. And I want people to understand this has nothing to do with the people, but a reflection of the culture that we live in. Right? There's no way you could sit and make 7 children and then come and cry on the People television, the People newspaper, the People social media, and complain to me that over 15 years you have made four payments and expect us to be understanding of this, because I have a very clear and articulate understanding of to take care of a child is not a cheap endeavor. So, family planning is available. So with just a little bit more common sense and a redirection of energy, because let me comment on some things earlier before I get into this about the security apparatus.
Yeah.
The security apparatus in Trinidad is absolute nonsense, and it's not getting any better any soon, right? And I'm saying that to say this: one, we have a system in Trinidad. I could get catch with a gun today, and I can bail tomorrow, right? So from a legislative standpoint, and when I'm talking a legislative standpoint, I'm talking both the PNM and the UNC, because they need a 3/5 majority to make. Right? So we have a problem with guns in Trinidad and Tobago, and there's no legislative arrangement to deal with it. Right? You will tell me I'm not comforted by the fact that you can show me 1,000 guns and you've been surveilling for 2 months, and the amount of crime going on in this country. If I'm harboring guns every 2 days or every 2 hours, I gotta check my stash just in case.
Obviously.
Yeah. Right? So that's the 2 things with the security situation. One, from a legislative standpoint, it needs to be dealt with. Some things need to be a non-bailable offense with maximum penalty. Because if I could receive bail today, go tomorrow, I can get catch with a firearm today. In the next 5 days, I can be bailed and I'm back out there and kill the witness. They will never have a working relationship with civilian and police officers.
I agree with you. You're right. It's just Ireland, this pay for babies business. Just trade me off every now and again. You get 2 free babies, and every baby after that you have to pay for. If it was like in the States where you had to pay for the delivery of those babies, and it was a serious cost, you would know. But RL.
And I hate, for example, anytime I see any woman or any family begging on the street and they're using children, I deliberately don't give them. Because children didn't ask to be put in these type of positions. And when you cry in poverty and you realize you can't take care of one and it takes 7 shots again.
Well, I really find it a little, and I mean, it's people life, but it's a little strange to make more children than payments on your house, eh? Like, when you put it that way, you made more children than payments on your house.
Exactly.
There's a kind of priority level to this, and I think some of that is because And really and truly, to be fair with some of it, it's because the government started running it lackadaisically in the first place. If this was a private place, a private business doing something, no way you were there 15 years having only made 4 payments.
Like I remember when I was renting, if my rent 2 days late, you get a text from your landlord. Please send me the receipt. And this is what I'm saying. A lot of things, including the police service, including the HDC situation, including the prison service, is about proper management. And not just proper management, but management that have KPIs and performance. Because even a lot of these prison officers, a lot of these police officers, a lot of these big managers in HDC, they are managers who went through the system and have no skill on it.
Yeah.
So everything is not measured. Everything is I have the power to make the authority and I delegate. There's no follow-up, there's no measurement, there's no KPIs, there's no projection, because here what? I get no money whether or not I do the job.
And that's the thing, they call it failing upward, and that happens in lots of government services. They fail upward. You could fail at this job and you're going to get an upward promotion to another job. And you fail at that job and they promote you to another, and you fail because, as you said, there's nothing to indicate whether you passed, whether you failed. There's no mark that says this is what we're looking for, this is what we're not looking for. So how do you ever know when someone is doing good or not? It's like what they were saying when they were excusing the commissioner of police, what they regularly say. And the police don't actually have that much to do with crime. It's a social issue and blah, 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 blah. And you don't understand when you're saying something like that. You're making it very despondent to the people trying to decide if you're doing a good job or not. If you're telling me that there's nothing I could look at in society, there's no factor in society I could look at to look and determine whether you are doing a good job, then it's best we fire you. Who knows whether your job is even needed or not?
And I will go even far based on your statement, Nathan. Is that if you're telling me that police can't do not the crime, then let's eliminate police service. But then let's go to the Middle East country where when you commit a crime, there's a definite cause and a definite result. Look at the rate of crime. If it is something you lose, you either get short sleeve or long sleeve. Right? No, I am saying in a society where there is no or extended correlation to crime, there's no, and there's only benefit and upside, because if I am the little boy in the ghetto and I see the man who running the block getting all the girls, driving the best of cars, eating every day, and I'm hungry, then I might as well be a criminal too, because he living his best life. I'm trying to go to school, hungry, and he doing everything that is a criminal is doing, and he's succeeding, and he's telling me to pray to God and to be
a good boy,
a tolerant citizen.
You're right, and that's I agree with that to a large extent. One of the main deterrents away from crime is punishment for crime. If every time someone commits a murder in Trinidad and Tobago, they know they are going to get caught and go to prison, the amount of murders is going to significantly decrease. You are only going to get murders where people lose their head in the moment and they didn't think things through. And not that those things don't happen, but that's much less. So to a large extent, the reason people do things is because they know they're going to get away. And the more people get away, the more people are going to believe that they're going to get away, and it's fueling each other in a cycle. Sayochan, I saw the 4 payments and 7 deposits. I saw that one. Sometimes we killing myself out here, but yeah, and you know, that's why we have to decide what exactly we're doing with HDC. What exactly is HDC's mission? Is it the mission to provide housing as a right to people? If that's the case, then don't even bother to mama guide them about $1 a month or how much ever you're saying they're supposed to pay. Just give them the free house and done with that. But if you're saying that they have to pay, then don't leave it for 15 years and 7 children. The children already have the heights marked off on the wall inside of that house, and then you come there to throw them out. And I understand why. I understand if they're not paying, they deserve to be thrown out like that. But in terms of on a countrywide scale, does something like that actually benefit the country? Throwing out a family after 15 years with 7 children, is that going to benefit the country on a wide scale? If you're talking about monetarily what you're going to do, it would have made sense that probably 2 years into their 15-year stay, when maybe they only had 1 child, you sent the bailiff and them back then to throw them out, and then he may have gotten that 25,000 from his employer that he said he got, and he would have made the payments 2 years into his 15-year stay, and we wouldn't have had this issue. Now, the thing is, if his employer was willing to front him $24,000 to pay this, it may very likely not necessarily be an issue of someone or a family who is not working for enough money to be able to pay these things off in time, but just a family who doesn't have it as the top of their consideration. And sometimes in cultural upbringing, in education level, these are things that to some people it's just not at the top of their mind. It's not. And I think if you're going to get into evicting people and families and the bad optics of that, you'd want to get in somewhere much earlier than 15 years down the road. The problem is not HDC, the problem is political interference. How is the problem political interference when the family doesn't pay? Like, I don't even understand how political interference has anything to do with this specific situation here. Where's the political interference? Now, there was another case. I had that article pulled up last week or earlier this week where someone went to court and was kicked out of one of their HDC apartments after they were allegedly allowed to, not apartment, I believe it was a house, they were allegedly allowed to stay in that house by the former housing minister, Mr. Munilal. I think he's a doctor right now. And back under the partnership, somewhere in 2010 to 2015 period there. And the person said they were given the house to stay in by him, and now they don't have proof of that, and I believe one of the judges threw them out of the house. That's political interference, but this case is not political interference. What's the political interference here? How where you lay your head down when the night comes is not of importance. There are different people out there. There are different people out there, Nissi. There are different people. There are people out there whose roofs are leaking, but they are buying the biggest TV. Who have an outhouse, but they bought a king-size bed from Courts on terms. I mean, there are people who have skewed views of priority levels in terms of dealing with things.
But here what we will come on social media, and because we look a certain type of way and we belong to a certain ethnic group, we will try to we'll play cards so that all of we feel the same way, and all of us will come from a particular place, and well, yes, they do like a certain type of people, right? Because that's what we do best. And next thing that I'm very concerned about, the 4% with the PSA, and one of the conversation I was having with one of my friends who does economics in Switzerland. When we look at public servant salary, on average, let's say between $7,000 and $10,000, could go either up or down. But on the far side of that, you telling me it costs $25,000 to maintain a prisoner. So as a society, we then therefore need to consider what is important and how much prisoners are we really going to maintain at that cost, and what is a more effective way in dealing with prison and recidivism, because it's a cost that...
You okay with prison slavery, Rome? You okay with enslaving we prisoners?
I am okay with nobody lives for free.
So yes, yeah, I purposefully say it in the controversial way because that is kind of what it is, eh? But listen, You in a free country, you cannot be deprived your rights without due process. If you go through due process, which is the court system, and a jury of your peers find you guilty, sir, ma'am, I hope you're not innocent and you didn't just slip through there, but you will have your rights removed. And I say you could work to maintain yourself. I find it ridiculous that we maintain prisoners. That's kind of opposite to me. You did something negative in society, so now we're paying for you? No.
We're not just paying, we pay that as exorbitant costs.
Yes.
And look, a simple thing as when you go into traffic, you are escorted. I have to sit down in traffic. So the luxuries that you have three meals guaranteed to you. You understand? And we have children in this nation who are suffering. We have people who cannot pay for HDC house. We have people we don't have money to pay public servants, but we go find $1 million by Christmas for back pay. Right? But what I'm saying, our resources in this country is being used to go towards all the wrong elements. And if you are not re-evaluating as a cost efficiency living model in terms of, and not just mama guying people, we are in a serious set street, because even I can't remember the correct number for the budget, but how much of that budget go into recurring expenditure and no new revenue driving measures?
Correct.
The only measures that went for revenue increasement to increase revenue is decrease on royalty taxes, decrease on exploration, went from 5% to 10%. But there is no number set out in the budget like $10 million for new and diversified revenue. None. But
that's always the problem, and it's nearly always going to keep rising and keep growing, because the politicians benefit from a system like that. So why are they going to shrink the system? That's the problem. It has a negative feedback loop with a bad incentive structure. So that's where it keeps going. Let the prisoners build the free houses to pay for their stay, and you solve your housing issue. That's an idea. Prisoners build free housing. That's an idea. And what you're saying there, Trini Hotep, just dash them in the jungle and thing. That was the way long time, you know. When I mean long time, I mean ancient time, not long time like in 1960. I mean thousands of years ago. That was a beautiful way to handle prisoners. When someone behaved bad in your civilization, you threw them into exile. You go survive on your own, seeing as you don't want, and it made perfect sense, because what are you as a criminal? You break the law. What is the law? The law is the group of rules, the body of rules that this specific society agreed we are all going to follow. If you don't want to follow the same rules that all of us in this group want to follow, then leave the group and you go into exile. Now, the thing is, back in those days, exile to a lot of people was a death sentence, because it's not easy to survive on your own. But it's kind of not my business. I didn't kill you. I didn't do you anything. You don't want to live by our rules? Fine, live by your own. To me, that's the best. Like, if we could have actually done that, all of these bad boys who refuse to live by the legal code in this country, exile. You go into the wilderness. You all go shoot each other and live Mad Max Wild West style out there. We'd have been fine. But it's unfortunate there's no wilderness to cast people into exile. Now we cannot exile people to Barbados. That's someone else's country. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
Alright. So our final thing, Nathan, before we go on to and change the conversation. Even how the prisons are built, they are built for congregation, and they are not built for the kind of numbers that we have. Because if you have high security, high risk prisoners, there's no need they should be communicating with the general public. They should be isolated in a high max section of the prison, where they are only given 30 minutes of sun, meals are fed through a hole, and you shouldn't have a gang leader having access to communicate.
No.
So these, even how the prison system is managed, it is not. It is. I don't want to beat up any prison officers because there's a lot of good and bad prison officers. But this system is designed to fail because it reached its capacity and it hasn't morphed or changed in so many years. And how it's designed, there is no longer a prisoner fault or a prison officer fault, or it's more the commissioner of prison fault. Right? What I mean by that not advocating different facilities that meets a different set of needs that exist in the society that we are existing in now. Those prisons were built over 100 and some of them are 50, 70 years ago, and it has not been really updated. So they are very porous. They are not designed for maximum security prisoners where you could isolate them and limit their access, limit their movements. So you're quite sure when they get 25 years, they get 25 for the very best.
You know, you're saying something there about how old these prisons are, and it just clicked a statement I read from Dr. Rowley in his response to the budget, and not all of what he says makes sense, but this to me did add up. Rowley said the laws that exist in this country today were designed for another people in another time with a different behavioral pattern. And unless we are prepared to make the changes required to treat with what we have to treat with today, we'll always be behind the 8 ball. And that is true. We have laws and systems and organizations and institutes, and you all know I'm generally more conservative, so I'm not saying to throw away everything, but we do have things sitting there that are obsolete. So someone was saying there that they would say the prisons are meant to rehabilitate, and that's part of the reason of the prisons. But actually, to me, the primary purpose of prisons, that rehabilitation thing, I'm sure that's actually more of a modern ideal when these bleeding heart mad people come in the place. The primary purpose of a prison is to separate dangerous people from the society. Rehabilitate them if we could, but the first primary, initial, most important purpose there is to separate the dangerous people from regular society. Main thing. And rehabilitation comes if we can somewhere along. So to me, I think prisons should initially be about separation, most importantly separation, and then with the separated people you attempt to see if any can be rehabilitated, and if you cannot be rehabilitated, then you shouldn't be back out.
And I agree. Rehabilitation should not be your first option. You have to prove that you're ready to re-enter society, and then a rehabilitation schedule should begin. It shouldn't be like, because even if prisons were meant to rehabilitation, it was to rehabilitate people for farming, cooking, picking tobacco, and that's what I'm saying. So the system in itself, and I'm a big fan of Christopher Rowley, but that statement he made is very clear, and it is a reflection of our bail laws. It's a reflection, because I have a thing that I said a long time ago. A lot of people become human rights activists and what is right for a human being, while all them other societies went through their barbaric stages and had law to deal with them in all their barbaric times, right? But all of a sudden, we can hang. We can't do this. So we're going through, because our nation is quite young compared to these nations that who pushing this 100% humanitarian thing.
You know, as you say that, before I forget, something that a paper a scientist was reading, or a discussion from some scientists, and they were theorizing that, you know, there are disparities in violence in different societies, in different ethnic groups and different cultures, and they were theorizing one of the reasons in Western Europe you see generally a more docile culture, a much less violent culture, is they literally killed off the genetics for that the immediate gratification, not good long-term planning. I'm looking for one specific word, it's slipping me. And a lot of the people with those, and there is a genetic component to some crime where you have less consideration for long-term consequences, and there are some people who seem to be more like that, and they seem to remain like that through their lives, and sometimes they seem to make children who are more like that. And for what many European countries did, they killed off many of those people during their time, and now they are all open and no, none of this should happen, no. And maybe they already formed some of their societies differently with some of that. So that's on what you're seeing there, Omar. And 56% of TT prisoners are recidivists. Rehabilitation doesn't work. Yeah, it's known. I wouldn't say it doesn't work. I have a statement I used to say more. People change, but they don't change until they change. And the problem is a lot of people assume that time passes and that magically makes people change, or that just a couple years change and, well, this person will be ready for change now. No. They may not want to change. That may be who they are. That may be who they want to remain. You don't know that, and it's not this kind of blank slate concept. It comes from the blank slate concept, where they believe every human was born a blank slate, and every nature we have is trained by our situation and circumstances. So if someone is a criminal, the only possible reason is because they were grown in negative situations. And you could understand why, if you have that kind of view, you have a view of the blank slate, that humans are blank slate, that means that any criminal is really a victim. The person is only doing crime because they are a victim of their situation and environment, and you can understand the bleeding heart there. But if you realize that that is not true, that is not necessarily true, and human beings are a natural fallen species, is the way theocratically it is put, that we have tendencies and proclivities that lean towards malevolence all on its own without having to face negative environments or circumstances. If you understand that, you could understand, no, someone doing crime isn't necessarily a victim, and there could be people who went through real horrible environments and still ended up not criminals. So it's not really just circumstance creates the person, and then in that case you have to deal with the person as being a criminal, not deal with changing the circumstances. You know, if we send them to school, if we educate them, if we build a home for them, if we show them we love them and give them enough hugs. This boy didn't get enough hugs, that's why he's murdering people. Okay, you hug them that much and they're still going to murder people when they get out. That's just how it goes. I remember reading about this, the science of evil. Is it natural or taught?
The tabula rasa view. Is a snake is always going to be a snake. Because tabula rasa is the Latin word for the whole blank slate, right? And I always tell people, crime is a matter of consequence and reward. Either your reward is physiologically, meaning that you get certain gratification from committing crime, or you get some physical reward from committing crime, or both. So it's a matter of consequence and reward. And if you realize that the reward is sometimes greater than the consequence in terms of chance, you're going to take your chance.
Yeah.
Because as a child, if we know when our father is wrong, we behave a certain way. When mommy is wrong, we behave a certain way. And even our drastic shift in crime, until we had that big clown Heinz, Heinz and this lady who is very, I can't even remember her name, Miss Ula.
Yeah.
Very disgraceful lady. Knows nothing about leadership. And that particular combination, someone who looks at Heinz and listens to everything Heinz say and agree, compared to a Stuart Young, who is very systematic, and a Gary Gifford. Look at that particular time period where results was given by any means necessary, compared to this particular two bobblehead people that we have there.
Trini Hotep, so can you be born a serial killer or made into one? I think it's a combination of both. It's like there are some people who may be born with, like LeBron James. He was born with the genetics to be the basketballer he is right now, but he had decades of intense training, and without those decades of intense training, he would not have been the person he was. So you could be born with the genetics necessary. So you have the requisite disagreeableness. That's one of the big 5 traits. You have the requisite disagreeableness. You aren't a very empathetic person naturally. Those aren't negative traits. Those are just traits. You aren't a naturally negative person, so you don't react a lot to blood and gore. You don't react to feelings and emotions like that. You're a more systematic person like that. You already have those tendencies, and then you go through 15 years of training under an abusive parent or an abusive home where they repeatedly abuse you night after night after night. You're going through training to become a serial killer. You were born with the genetics to make you into the best serial killer, and now you're going through the elite training so that you perform at that top serial killer level. So I think that's kind of what causes most of those things. So I'm a parent now. I've been a child of parents with multiple children. I see these things. You see it in parenting too. Each child a parent has isn't equally capable of doing everything just alike. There are some children who may be more athletic naturally. There are some children who may be more gifted in communication, more gifted in mathematics, more gifted in different areas. And your job may be, as a parent, if you're trying to be a good parent, maybe to figure out those exact avenues that each person may excel more in and push them into those avenues. So I think in the negative side, that's what it is with many of that crime and criminality thing. There are many people who already have certain natural proclivities, and then you put them into the situation where you train and fuel these natural proclivities. You're going to increase the manifestation of it into the real world. All right, people, is 11:02 looking to make a early night in there and a nice little Friday night chill. Anything else to say there, Rome, before we dive out?
Just before we leave, just to follow up on what you said, in a society like ours where crime has become rampant and people getting desensitized, and crime is rewarded through our music, through how we interact and how we pose as the biggest bad man. So while people may have those genes and it may be somewhat that's dormant, it becomes very active when a society like us becomes desensitized to these things. And although they have the potential for these things, and society with its norms and nori should have been able to guide them and let them know there's a consequence and reward mechanism. When that consequence and reward mechanism is taken off the board, and you see and you start getting reward for all the crime and criminality that you have, or serial killer that you're involved in, then you start telling yourself, you start creating what we call a abnormal reality for yourself. And that's basically what is happening, because I know sometimes we cannot understand how come they could do this. Their reality is different from ours. Their perspective when they see the world, it has been programmed by their environment. I'm not saying that one is greater than the other, but if you are in an environment long enough and this has become that environment the necessary expectation for you to survive, and that environment has been rewarding that, those behaviors develop naturally after a period of time.
I got you. All right, people. That's all we have for now. Thank you guys for tuning in. This has been the Mindful Live Show. It's a Friday. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. We won't be here tomorrow. I'll be here again next week, Monday, for the next Mindful Live Show. Be sure to catch me then around the 9 p.m. time. We're getting back to that 9 p.m. as we're supposed to be. Thank you, Sayo-chan. Thank you. I hope you guys will join me there. Be sure to subscribe if you are not yet subscribed over there on YouTube. Like up the page wherever you are. Stay tuned for more videos. Hey, hey, like mindful education, we're still doing that. We still teach. Yes, we still have those learning pods going. They're going well. If you're interested in those learning pods, small classes, homeschool style teaching for students from preschool stages all the way up to CXC. If you're interested in that, be sure to contact us. We also provide private tuition for most CXC and CAPE subjects. If you're interested in that, hit us up. Until the next one, people.
Nathan,
Yeah.
tell me a number in a DM now, because I know a couple people, serious people who want to write over CXC.
Okay,
So
I will.
Your number in a DM, and I will make the arrangements and have them contact you.
Okay, I'll do that. All right, people. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. This has been the Mindful Live Show. I'll see you guys again for the next one. Ladies, peace. Hold it up.